Hi, everyone. We are live. This is First Draft Friday. I am your host, Alessandra Torre with Authors AI. And today I am joined by Joan Dempsey, who's going to be talking all about how to write a gripping first page of your novel. So I am so excited about this topic. I know I say that with every topic, but this is such a great topic that's constantly valid. And I can see the room's filling up. Joan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, and thank you so much for having me. And hey, everybody. Also, shout out to people I know who are here from the Gutsy Great Writers novel writers studio, Gutsy Great Novelist Writers Studio, which I host an online community. So, hi, friends. I know you guys are here. Yeah, basically, I am a novelist first and a teacher second, and I run an online community. I host an exclusive writing retreat each year here in Maine. I teach online classes, one of which is called Write a Gripping First Page, oddly enough. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Fantastic. And what type of fiction do you write in your,
in my writing life?
Writing side of your life, yeah.
Yeah, I write literary fiction. I think of it as political page-turning literary fiction. So you can see my novel on the shelf behind me. This is how it begins. And that one, I mean, basically, I love to write about social issues with a sort of even-handed balance between various sides of different issues.
Yeah, I'm sure you're super busy then with everything, you've got lots of fodder. Okay, so let's jump right in. So when I'm an author and I'm looking at my first page, are these tips that are as they're writing their first page or editing an pre-existing, first chapter, or both?
It really can be both. I mean, most of the people who take the class with me and most of the people I work with already have an existing first page, and we end up working on what exists. But if you haven't written the first page, the stuff that I teach and the tips I want to share with you today are also super helpful. And as I'm sure you guys know as readers, and Alessandra, you and the other writers who are on the program here, that first page is so critical, right? Because you have to grab your reader, whoever that reader is. Could be an agent, could be a publisher, could be just a regular reader, but you really need to grab them very quickly in order to draw them in. And there are common elements that make that work, and there are things that you really should avoid. And I just want to share that in the time that I've been working with writers, which is probably close to 20 years now, I have literally read, 400 to 500 manuscripts as an editor. And I can tell within the first sentence, typically, if I'm in the hands of a capable writer, and I can tell right away in the first page what things that writer needs to tweak in order to make it the best page it could possibly be. So, agents, when they read, that's what they look at, right? Yeah. If you're sending your query to an agent, they're going to look at that and they're going to make a snap decision just like that. So the stronger your first page is, the better you can represent yourself in your work.
I love everything you just said, and I can't wait to hear those tips that you're going to share over the next half hour. I am a huge snob in that I will put aside a book super quick. So, and like you said, within the first couple paragraphs, I'm normally like, this is a book that it appeals to me, or
nope. Yeah,
so, exactly. When I'm in a bookstore, it takes me hours because I'm reading those first few pages and then, deciding what to do. So, okay, let's jump right in. What are some of your tips?
Yeah, well, I will say, I wanted to start by saying, so in this class I teach, there are a whole bunch of things that we go through, and I'm going to tell you those quickly because we only have 30 minutes. So I would ask, if you're here with us or even if you're listening to the replay, take a piece of paper, jot these things down. And I can't get into them in depth, but I will sort of go over a couple of the most major ones. I'll also say that in this class, we look very, very carefully at the opening line, and then we looked really carefully at the entire first page. And the opening line, I love opening lines. I mean, maybe like you, Alessandra, when I go to a bookstore, I do the same thing. I just open it up. If I'm captivated, right away, I'm good. And that opening line has to be something that I just love. Otherwise, I'm probably not going to keep going. So we look at first lines and critique those first lines, and we look at first pages. And I wanted to share, let's see where I have it here. There was a great article about Stephen King in The Atlantic, and this was years ago. I forgot, 2013, I guess it was. And this quote by Stephen King is perfect. He says, "An opening line should invite the reader to begin the story. It should say, 'Listen, come in here. You want to know about this.'" And I think that's it. That, that's what captures that first line. The first line is so, so critical.
Real quick before you jump in, we did have a comment, and this is a great question for those watching. It's someone from Facebook. We can't see their name, but it says, "I assume the first page is also a priority for nonfiction." So if we do have some nonfictioners watching, do you want to speak on that before you?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I'm glad you put that out there, because I've worked with lots of nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, memoir, all of that. And it's just as critical for those books. I speak typically more about fiction because somewhere along the line, I changed my focus from fiction and nonfiction to just looking at novels. So I'll be talking a lot about novels, but the principles absolutely apply. And I've had especially memoirists, a lot of memoirists will join the class because, a lot of, as I'm sure the person who commented there knows, a lot of narrative nonfiction reads like novels. So all of the same principles apply.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So, what I'd love to do is, let me start with the first sentence, and then I will quickly go through the different elements to consider to include on your opening page, and then the elements to avoid, if you can, on your first page. And, we can take questions from there. So let's see. I just want to share this. This is from, and I'm not sure, Alessandra, if I sent this to you guys in advance. It's 35 opening sentences from novels.
Oh.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that ended up on the website or not. But in any case, that's what I'm looking at. And this is taken from the Write a Gripping First Page class. So here's the opening line of Jhumpa Lahiri's novel, The Namesake, which I personally loved. She says, "On a sticky August evening, 2 weeks before her due date, Ashima Ganguly stands in the kitchen of a Central Square apartment, combining Rice Krispies and Planters peanuts and chopped red onion in a bowl." Now, part of the reason I love that sentence is it is so packed with stuff, and it illustrates some of the principles that I think are really important. So I'd love to see if it's possible. I'm just looking at the comments here. If you guys would write in the comments, and Alessandra, you're welcome to jump in, what you hear in that sentence that you feel is important. I'll read it again quickly. "On a sticky August evening, 2 weeks before her due date, Ashima Ganguly stands in the kitchen of a Central Square apartment, combining Rice Krispies and Planters peanuts and chopped red onion in a bowl." What are you learning from that sentence? What is it about that opening sentence that draws you in? Any ideas around that? Any thoughts?
Well, one thing I love is the picture that's painted. So it's like I can immediately envision this woman, with her big belly, but the level of detail, it's very, I talk a lot with authors about, you don't need a ton of detail, but if you can, pinpoint some specific details, and he did a fantastic job of painting a picture with that. And so you can see the comments. Mel said her cravings coming up on her due date. And I've never been pregnant, but suddenly now I understand, because I was like, that's an odd combination of food. But now I understand it's because she's pregnant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Nina also says, Nina Mars says, sets place, time, and character. That's one of the things I love about this too. It's August, it's hot, she's in Central Square. If you know anything about this author, you'll know it's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which isn't evident from this. she's eating Rice Krispies and Planters peanuts, so you can probably tell from that she's in the States somewhere, but she does have this weird combination, right? And Janet's saying something's about to happen in a couple of weeks. That's right. So you know that she's both craving something that we might think is unusual, and you then read on and learn sort of what that is. And VJ Bauer, or Vince, as I know you, Vince, hi, glad you're here. Sticky stuck to me right away. That's right. You get
that was
this
a great adjective. Yeah,
I love absolutely that. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's so much that can get packed into just the first line, and it's amazing once you start teasing those first lines apart how much can be packed into even just a small line. Like here's another one. This is from a book called Death with Interruptions by Jose Saramago. And the first line is, the following day, no one died. Super simple.
Love that.
But, he's already setting something in place. And what would it look like if no one died on a particular day, right? You want to know.
And I want to know, like, who's no one? Is it no one at, like, the summer camp? And if so, why? Like, that seems like an odd thing to point out, right? Like, were people dying before? Or is it no one in the entire world? Which is a whole entirely different type of book. So I love that. I recently was in a charity anthology, and we were given the opening line, and everyone had to write their own stories. There were 24 stories that all had the same opening line, and then they took it, and it was amazing the different ways they went.
Yeah, I love that exercise because it also points out that, there are a lot of principles to pay attention to in the first line or the first paragraph, but there are opening lines and opening pages, as many writers as there are, right? Everybody does something different, but there are certain things to pay attention to. So one more first line, and then let's look at some principles. And this is from Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. And it's actually pretty rare. If you go to a bunch of novels on your bookshelf, and I think this is particularly true in memoir, it's very hard to find books that open with dialogue. I do this in a class. I have people go and look, and most people come back and say, I found one, and I looked at, 30 books or whatever. But this is a great example of starting with dialogue that's really compelling, from Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Where's Papa going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. Such a great line. And where's Papa going with that axe? Right? Hey, Deborah, how are you? I'm glad to have you here. Some of these folks are in my online community, which if you're writing a novel, you're welcome to come join us. It's gutsygreatnovelist.com. It's our writer's studio, and we've got like 1,000 writers. It's so great. Okay, so let's look at maybe, what do you think, Alessandra? I'm thinking about looking first at like the elements to avoid on your opening page, and then maybe.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, let's talk about what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is based on
just as important as what to do. So.
Yeah, in fact, in some ways, it's more important.
Yeah.
And there are trends. What's interesting is if you're in a position like I am, where you read an awful lot of manuscripts, and I do have a page one prize and also a chapter one prize that I just started doing last year. And so I've been reading a ton of first pages and a ton of first chapters. So I see a lot of the same things, and there are all these trends. Like one of the trends I noticed in the chapter one prize last year is that the name Jake and the name Lily are super common right now. So many of the novels that I was reading have Jake and Lily as main characters. Kind of interesting. I don't know why, but it's just a little aside. But anyway, elements to avoid. This is one. Actually, let me back up, because what I want to say is everything I'm about to say has exceptions and caveats. If you have worked with me at all, you know that I am not a big fan of rules. I'm a fan of guidelines, but if whatever you have to do to tell the best story you can tell is what you should do. So, what I'm about to say is not don't ever do this, but if you're going to do it, make sure it's done for a really strong purpose and that it serves your novel. So with that said, elements to avoid: excessive backstory. I've seen this a lot, and people people often will put a prologue into a novel, and do a big information dump, a big thing of backstory. And there's a reason for that. I think as writers, we do that because we need to know, right? So we write this thing and we feel like, oh, the reader needs to know that too. And the reader doesn't need to know everything that you know. And excessive backstory is really, really boring.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not needed. So if you start to read, the other piece of that is that it's a sign that the writer hasn't quite figured out yet where the novel actually begins.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like, okay, let me clear my throat for 30 pages and then we'll start, so try to avoid that.
Let me ask you a quick question on that. So if this is a book in a continuing series, what do you think what do you suggest is the best way to kind of catch up a reader if a lot of time has passed since the last book was published, or if someone is jumping into that series kind of in book 3, what's the best way to catch them up fairly quickly without just excessively dumping?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm always amazed at how well so many series writers do this. I think, and the ones who do it best, start the next book in the middle of something that's already happening. And then they sort of pepper in the backstory, the details, like the first time in book 3 that this particular character shows up, they will say he blah, 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 blah. And so there are introductions to characters and just small things put on the page. But the reality is if somebody starts a series on, in book 3, you want that book to stand alone. So, so not a big information dump at the beginning. Start that novel wherever that novel is going to start, and then pepper in the backstory details, only the ones that are really necessary along the way. And, maybe those can all come in chapter 1, but I've certainly seen it done well where they come throughout the book and, as a reminder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And a tip I've heard that I like is, if you watch a movie like, the third Star Wars movie or something like that. I mean, the movies don't have the opportunity typically. I mean, sometimes they'll put like a chapter, a paragraph at the beginning on a black screen, but movies don't have the opportunity to just ramble on with backstory. They have to show everything in a scene. But a lot of times they completely kind of skip over and they just tell a story, set in the thing, and they don't really have to give a lot of backstory. And the reader or the viewer is smart enough to figure things out as the story's told.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple questions came in here from Nina and also from Christine. Nina's asking, do you recommend writing the opening line after you finish your first draft? Yes and no. Sometimes the opening line will come to you very quickly and right away and set the stage and take you on the journey of writing the story. Oftentimes you are going to want to go back and revise that. In fact, chapter 1 in general, I advise people to get off chapter 1 as fast as you can. And I'm a very slow writer, and I write to discover. I'm a pantser, so I don't plot things out. So I very methodically will write chapter 1, but by the time you get to the end of the book, so much stuff has happened that you may need to change chapter 1. So yes, sometimes you get that opening line right out of the gate, and other times you're going to want to come back and change it. And then Christine is asking, what if the prologue is less than 1 page as a paragraph? Well, so the prologue is a whole different beast, I think. And those of you guys who are here who have worked with me know that I'm usually not a fan of a prologue, although the book I'm working on now has 2. So back to that, there are no rules, only guidelines. And what I would say about a prologue is that if the prologue is absolutely necessary for the current story to be told, then include that. But it really shouldn't be used as an information dump or a backstory thing. Readers want to get right into the story, and that's the important piece. They want to get right into the story. So anyway, let me go just checking the time because there's so much.
I know.
Yeah. So back to elements to avoid in your opening. And this is a very popular one, and I understand why it is, which is the waking up and the dream scenes. A lot of people will start with, she woke up on a sticky August evening while she was pregnant, whatever. And a lot of people will literally start with, she woke up and then got out of bed and then went and brushed her teeth. And then don't do that. Don't, unless there's a really, really compelling reason why you have to show this person waking up like they're turning into a giant cockroach, a la Franz Kafka, or, if there's something very unusual that happened in their life that put them in that place. But I will tell you, having read so many manuscripts, it is done over and over and over. And if agents, editors, whoever are reading this, they are going to say, oh, here we go again. Yeah. So, and the other piece, and this is related, is don't start with a dream sequence. Don't pull your reader into this really interesting dreaming thing. And then on page 3, reveal, oh, it's just a dream. Because you're setting a contract with the reader, as soon as you begin to read the book, and you're teaching them how to read the book. So if you teach them that this is what it's going to be like, and then you yank the rug out from under them and say, oh, it was only a dream, that annoys readers very much. Another one is try to avoid long, long passages of landscape and description. Great exceptions of that. John Steinbeck almost always starts with, some long sweeping thing about the Salinas Valley in California. And that's John Steinbeck. It's sort of an older style. You can do it, but in this day and age, it's probably best to avoid that. Another one, and I see this a lot, and this one personally drives me crazy, is talking heads. So you have a couple of characters who are talking to each other. You have no idea where they are. You don't know what the setting is. They're just sort of talking. And so I call that talking heads because readers love to be grounded in a particular time, particular place, a particular setting. So don't just have people talking at each other without any context. It's very unsettling. So I hear those dogs. Hi, doggers.
I was like, where's my mute button?
I'm surprised mine haven't come out and started working yet. And speaking of that, the other thing is try to avoid generic settings. Vivid details are what brings stories to life. So if you're writing a memoir and you're starting out in the kitchen of your childhood home and a particular thing happens there, say something about that kitchen that differentiates it from everybody else's kitchen. Use a detail that may show the time period. It was yellow linoleum on the floor, or chunky walnut cabinets or something. Readers crave that kind of detail. So really try to bring your setting to life. Another thing to avoid, and I use Game of Thrones, the first book of Game of Thrones in my class. The opening page of that first book has so many characters on it that your head is spinning. And of course, Game of Thrones, they have a million characters, right? But and it's interesting.
And none of them are simple names. They're complicated names.
That's right.
I listened to Game of Thrones as an audiobook. I tried to listen to it as an audiobook, and I got like 5 minutes into it, and I was like, I'm so confused because especially like hearing the voices said, I couldn't tell the difference between locations and people's names because they were all complicated. And yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I just noticed that Deborah and Elaine both mentioned landscape. So Deborah says P.D. James, so much landscape, and obviously P.D. James is, very well established and well known. So another great example of these aren't rules. These are, general guidelines about things to avoid. Where the Crawdads sing, endless vegetation, a huge success, absolutely. And part of the reason for that with Where the Crawdads Sing is that setting, that rich, lush setting in the, I want to say wetland, but that's not right. You know what I mean?
I don't know where it's at, so sorry, I can't.
Yeah, is almost a character in and of itself. Yeah, and it's a great, thank you, Elaine, for pointing that out, because that's a great way to transition to elements to consider, because if you're working with an environment like she was in Where the Crawdads Sing, that takes on a life of its own, and that informs the tone of the novel. It sort of sets the scene. Everything is sort of, feels connected to that setting, and that setting is crucially important. Again, what I would say, and I bet if you go back and you look at that book, every time she shares a detail about that setting, it's done for a particular reason, right? Everything that's in your book needs to be there for a particular reason. So just something to think about. And Vince is asking, once upon a midnight dreary, should we stay away from using weather as a way to ease into a story? Not necessarily. I mean, it was a dark and stormy night, right? That's so cliche. But I think the thing I would ask about that, Vince, is, do you need to ease into a story? And in some stories, maybe you do. Maybe you want to sort of slowly draw the reader in. Steinbeck does that with the Salinas Valley, describing this beautiful thing, sort of drawing you from a long vista into the particulars of the story. So the question I would have is, do you want to ease into the story, or do you want to jump right in? And again, need to have reasons for both of those things. So let me see what I've got here as well.
Yeah, that's one of those rules that I always heard early on, like never start with the weather. But I love what you said at the very beginning of this, which was, these are guidelines. And I always say you can break rules as long as you know you're breaking them and you know why you're breaking them.
Yeah.
And just because I want to isn't normally a good enough, reason.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, if you ask yourself that question as a writer, why am I doing this? And if the answer is, well, just because I want to, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
You need to be able to say, I am doing this because fill in the blank. It's also just a great thing to ask yourself as a writer, because you really do need to know the answer to that question, right? So anyway.
That happens a lot with me with editors. They'll ask like, oh, can we cut this scene? And if I can argue back and give reasons why, but a lot of times if it's just like, oh, well, there's really no reason why we can't just end the scene, 3 pages earlier, then we should probably end this scene 3 pages earlier.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm mindful of our time, and we've got about 3 minutes left. So let me just tell you these elements to consider for your opening page. And I won't go into detail. I'm just going to read what those are. Quickly establish your point of view so the reader knows who the main character is. Begin your story in media res, which means in the middle of things. Again, don't wake up and set the stage. Jump right into whatever the first thing is. And related to that is introduce an action. If you can begin, and it doesn't have to be shoot 'em up action. It can just be something is currently happening. Open in a specific setting. No talking heads. Be specific about where you are. Readers love to be grounded in a place. Build anticipation and suspense. And basically that can be as simple as asking yourself as the writer, what questions is the reader asking themselves right now that they want answers to? That's all it is. So read your first page, look at what do readers want to know, and then how are you going to deliver that? So it's really as simple as that. And this is true for all your writing. Write lean and strong sentences. No unnecessary words. They can be long, they can be complex, as long as every word matters. So lean and strong prose is powerful prose. So important to look at that. And that's sort of the nutshell of all of the different things that make a good opening page and things to avoid. And yeah.
I love that. This is your very last opportunity for those that are watching live on YouTube and Facebook. If you have any final questions, I have a quick one. Do you have an ideal link that a first chapter would be, or a first scene? Because I know some authors, the first chapter is a bunch of scenes. So that opening scene, is there an ideal length, or does it just vary depending on what you're trying to get done?
It varies depending on what you're trying to get done. Yeah, I mean, that's true about most things, I think. And what I would recommend, and we do this in the class that I teach, is I share a ton of first pages, and we read them and we study them, and people go off and grab their own first pages of their own work, but also whatever they have lying around the house. And you'll see very quickly the wide variety, but the important thing is, what are they doing that's working, and how can you figure that out? So it could be really short, could be really long as it's working for the narrative itself. So
we do have a question. This will be our last question, and it's from Patty. And she said, if it's a romance, do characters have to meet on the first page? I'd love to answer this. I write romance novels, and I say absolutely not. I was told early on that the first male that the female meets is the one that she's going to end up with at the end. And how incredibly boring is that, right? There's never any guest scene or guesswork. So no, absolutely. Oftentimes my characters meet 20% into the book once they've had a chance to really ground themselves and, and have their own backstories and life. I said that it's the last question, but I do, Nina asked how we can find out more about your classes. And that really kind of takes me into how they can find out more about you. So can you share where they can find you and your classes?
Yeah, absolutely. The best place to go is gutsygreatnovelist.com. gutsygreatnovelist.com. And there you will find a link to all my online classes, to the online. It's a free, private online community. A bunch of those folks are here today. It's really terrific. That is for novelists. And that's free, and you can just request to join, and you'll find a lot of stuff in there. But gutsygreatnovelist.com, and click on classes, and you'll find the Write a Gripping First Page, which is open right now. So
fantastic. Thank you, guys. If we didn't get to your questions, I'm so sorry. A bunch came in right at the end. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you for chiming in. And if you're interested in meeting Marlo, which is our artificial intelligence that can read and critique your novel in just a few minutes, check us out at authors.ai. You can try her out for free or explore her more advanced options. So that's www.authors.ai. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another First Draft Friday. Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your questions, but best of luck with your opening lines and opening chapters. And thank you, Joan, for joining us today.
my pleasure. Thank you.